Hello, ladies. My name is Jennifer, and I'm a Christian. I don't claim any other name but that of Christ, so I'm just a Christian, and this is Women of the Word, a Bible study for women dealing with issues affecting women. I'd like to begin with a prayer. Dear Lord, please bless those who are watching this video and their study of your Word so that it brings fruit to their lives and glory to you. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. All right. So what we are going to be dealing with to begin with is why we believe in a creator at all. Because the modern world does not. There's no way to put that other than most of the modern world is atheistic. Well, they're not entirely atheistic. There's a lot who believe in other gods. There's a lot who believe in a spiritual thing that they can't really explain. But there's many more out. I mean, there's a lot who believe in something. But whether they believe in the God that the Bible describes, that's very, very few. And the entire world is telling people not to believe in even those other things. It's gotten very, very difficult for most people. So, why would I believe? I mean, I'm a part of that world, right? So why should I believe in a God? Like somebody said, that Sky Daddy. Yeah, we don't describe him that way for obvious reasons. So let's get started. We believe that the belief in a creator should be the result of rational thought. I'm not going to ask you to leave your brain at the church door. There's just no reason for that. It defies everything that we are. If God created us, he created us to be rational, so the belief in him should be rational. Use your brain. God gave it to you for that. Okay? We also believe that that he designed the universe. So you should be able to see that. And because of that design, belief in a creator is rational. Because design is rational. And it only comes from rationality. So, and the design of the universe can be seen in the laws of physics, the law of cause and effect, the laws of irreducible complexity, biogenesis. And because it's design requires a designer. That's always intelligence. Design is always an intelligence. Okay? Let's get into this. So, we're going to start with the laws of physics. Now, what the laws of physics is, that's a broad term, but especially the first and second laws of thermodynamics. These are the laws that they're called laws because they're always true. They're not laws that someone that were written. They are laws because they're always true. So let's take a look at them. I'm going to have to fix that. Anyway, so the laws of physics. The first is the conservation of mass and energy. So mass and energy, neither one, can be either created nor destroyed. And that's just what they are. So there always will be the same amount because we're in what they call a closed system. So you have the universe and it's like a box. And all of the stuff that's in the universe is in that box. And it can't get out. And you can't put more in. And that is the first law of thermodynamics. The total mass and energy in a closed system remains constant. Neither matter nor energy can be created nor destroyed without opening the system. Spirit is not made of matter or energy. It's not material. So the first law doesn't apply to it. So what if a spirit opened the system? What would you call that? You'd call that a miracle. And it does apply, however, to everything else in the universe. That applies to you, to me, to the bed, to the planet, to the stars. The second law of thermodynamics is decay, or chaos. Part of the total mass and energy will become unusable in every process. So a process is just really anything where work happens. That's the scientific term for it. It's not that you're doing your job. It's like lifting a book or lighting a fire or anything like that. The fire is a process, and some things get lost during that process. And that means that all things move toward a state of chaos rather than order. They all slow down. They all decay. These are all really just different ways of saying the same thing, but they have different connotations as to what we're talking about. Chaos is the opposite of order. Just that's the simplest way to put that. Things can seem chaotic without actually being chaotic. But here's a good example. We're going to take that fire. When you burn something, you are taking fuel and oxygen and applying heat. And all of the things in there are changed into something else. So you're not losing energy or matter, but they are changed into something else. So the heat changes the log that you're burning into carbon and ash and heat. More heat. Much of that was used became heat in the process of burning. But you don't get that heat back. It goes out into the atmosphere and it's lost to where we can't use it anymore. A lot of times it heats the air as it dissipates, and then it just, you can't get that back and put it back together into the log. It just doesn't work that way. By the same token, things can't come back to life after they've died. So, we don't see chaos taking over the universe, though. We see those processes happening. Stars are burning gas, but they're still there. We see order. We see complexity. We don't see a unified conglomeration of nothingness, of just mashed together matter and energy. We still see real tangible things that are still working, still being used, still doing what they should be doing. You take a bigger picture, you have a galaxy, a spiral galaxy. If this universe was as old as a lot of physics teachers would tell you, yeah, that spiral wouldn't be there. It would have homogenized into just an even mass of plasma, or even less than plasma. The time that they want to put in there, it's too long for that to still be true. Okay. The next thing we're going to look at is the law of cause and effect. And what that is how things have to have a cause. So, everything that is material has to have a cause that came before it. So your cause is your parents. They caused you to exist. We're not going to discuss how. But they caused you to exist. You have a cause. So who caused them? Their parents. You have a table, and it has a cause. Somebody cut down a tree and worked the wood and turned it into a table. So the table has a cause. Car accidents have causes. Whatever those causes may be. Somebody didn't do what they were supposed to. Whoever that somebody is, they are the cause of that effect, which is the car wreck. Okay? Now, it has to have come before it, doesn't it? Because if it didn't come before it, it wouldn't have been there to cause it. Anybody who has watched Doctor Who understands this. But if you haven't, just think of time. If you don't have something that comes before it in time, it can't be there to cause it. They have to come in the right order. Eventually. Even if you were time traveling, you would have to get before something had happened in order to cause it to happen, even if you yourself are out of order. But that's fictional. I'm sorry. I tend to play around with that sort of thing a lot. And quantum mechanics tries to play with that. They play those what-if games. What if somebody was traveling through time? Well, they didn't come before it. Well, yes, they had to get before it to make it work. So, even within quantum mechanics, you have to have the cause happen before the effect. Okay? And so you have Einstein's equations. They proved that the universe is expanding. Einstein didn't like that. He was actually of the original opinion that the universe had always existed. But between his equations and telescope observations of the, I think they call it the red Doppler effect, they could move. See, things were tending to move away. And that meant that the universe was expanding, which by definition means that it used to be smaller. Which means it used to have it had a beginning. So, because eventually you run out of smaller to get to. So it also has to have a cost that's sufficient for the effect. So the cause of the effect had to be big enough, powerful enough to cause that effect. We have our table, and it had to have, whatever made it had to have enough power to do that. So in that case, you have saws, and you have sanders, you have routers, you have lathes for making the legs the specific shapes. You have, after all of that's done, you have to put the screws in there to attach all the pieces, and use glue to reinforce that, and all the pieces have to fit correctly. So, and on top of all of that, you have to have someone who knows what they're doing and how to make that happen in order to do that. That's the power that you need to have a table. Plus, you have to have the material, which is the tree. Okay? And if a cause is not powerful enough, it obviously can't cause the effect. One of my favorite preachers online likes to tell this joke. He says, you got to get everybody inside. You've got to get everybody inside. They're everywhere. And the person he's talking to says, what do you mean? What's out there? They're causing all of these things to wreck out there on the road. They're slamming into them, and they're just causing all these wrecks. He says, what is? They're gnats. They're huge. They're just, and that doesn't work. A gnat or a mosquito or a fly can't cause a car wreck. They don't have enough power to do that. Don't care how hard you slam them into something, it doesn't work. Right? So the next thing we're going to be looking at is irreducible complexity and biogenesis. A system is irreducibly complex if there's no function for any system that is missing one part. Good example is a mousetrap, just because it's a pretty simple machine. Yeah, the 5 parts of the mousetrap. There's the platform, the little thingy that it's all attached to. And the wire holder, the little wire that's got the hook on it. And then you have the hammer, which is the big square part of the mousetrap. I should have had one in my hands when I was doing this. But anyway. And then you have spring down here. Pardon me. And the spring is attached to that hammer where when you release it, it's going to snap back. And so and then the wire holder holds onto that by the bait point. So that if something comes along, touches the bait point, and the hammer snaps. If any of those pieces aren't there, that mousetrap won't work. And I know this the hard way. I broke one once, and I tried to put it back together, and it just didn't work. Because I didn't get everything put back together right. So all the pieces have to be there, or it just doesn't work. Yeah, I had trouble when I was a kid with mousetraps. I can tell you stories, but let's move on. So, even the simplest creatures, like bacteria or mycelium or amoebas, they have complex systems. They have organelles. You have mitochondria. You have, I can't remember all the little pieces. There's a lot of them actually. You have the cytoplasm that's all floating around in there in the cell. You have the outside of the cell, whatever that's called, and all of the different pieces in there, and you have the nucleus, which has the DNA and the RNA, and all of that is the instructions for how the cell does its job. If any of it's missing, the cell's not going to work. It just won't. Which means they all have to be there at the same time. All the pieces, if they're not present at the same time, the machine won't work. The cell won't work. The cell will die. It will not be able to reproduce. There will be no more cells. So, the law of biogenesis is that all life comes from other life of the same kind. Puppies come from dogs. Acorns come from oaks. Mushrooms comes from mycelial fungus. You came from your mommy and daddy. They came from your grandparents, and so on and so forth. It's always of the same kind. Now, there's caveats to that too, isn't there? What about the wolfen? And you're like, what is that? A wolfen is a crossbreed between a whale and a dolphin. This has happened in nature once or twice. And that's because whales and dolphins are of the same kind. So that's one thing we need to discuss, is that the Bible, when it's talking about kinds, it doesn't mean species. Because two different species may be able to crossbreed and bring something that's called a hybrid. But they're still the same kind. You're not going to get an entirely different type of creature. So, and also, life can adapt to its environment. There's a thing called epigenetics, where the environment causes different parts of your DNA to turn on. And it can take a couple of generations for that to happen. Take my genetics. My great-grandmother was actually quite thin. And that my maternal great-grandmother. And my paternal grandmother was also quite thin. My dad was pretty thin. And so is my brother. But my grandmother and my grandfather were both a bit overweight. Quite a bit overweight. Even though they were hard workers and worked throughout their lives, they got overweight from what they were eating. And then my mother was eating the same things they were. So hers changed. And now mine. And I've always been overweight. Ever since the 6th grade, I've been overweight. And so it's going to be really difficult for me to change that genetic in myself. It's much harder for me to lose weight than it would have been for my great-grandmother. And that's how things have changed over time. We adapt to our environments. And my environment is sedentary. I'm a bus driver, so I do things, but it's still a sit-down job. And that can be taken to any extent you want. Darwin's finches are actually a great example of that. He went to the Galapagos and he saw these finches. And they were different than any finch he'd ever seen. They had different shaped beaks, different shaped feet. They were adapted to their environment. And he took that as an example of evolution, but they were still finches. I'm still human. I'm not a different species just because I'm overweight. I feel like that sometimes, but I'm not. And so, yes, life will always come from other life of the same kind. And so you take those two things together, and if life always comes from other life of the same kind, all of the parts have to be there to work. You can't evolve the entirety of life on Earth from a single organism that couldn't have existed out of nothingness on its own anyway. And it's like if you were to create an environment that had everything a cell needed and put the pieces of that cell, without them being already a piece together, into the same, it's like a beaker. It's got all the stuff. Do you think you'll get a cell? No, you just have a soup. You have destroyed it. It can't go back. You can't develop life from non-living chemicals without help. And that goes back to that spirit thing. What if someone opened the box again? That changes that. That changes the example. Sorry, I jumped ahead without the slide. And so now we're going to get down to who opened the box. Design requires a designer. A design is a concept of either an object, a process, or a system that is specific and in most cases detailed. You're building something, you want a blueprint. It's like, say you're going to build a computer or a camera. You need something. You need images to build that. Also, without knowing what they are, you can tell that they've been designed. You just can tell. Look at your computer and pretend you didn't know what a computer was. And you can tell that it was designed by someone. There's a brain behind that object. It didn't just bloop. It didn't just happen out of nothing. It didn't just happen out of the sand, like say you found it on a beach. It didn't just happen out of the sand just because some of the chemicals in it are the same. Yes, there is silicone in sand. But just because you found the computer in the sand didn't mean that the silicone came from that sand. It didn't grow out of it. It doesn't work that way. Now, design is evident in nature. You take your eyeball, that thing right there on your face, and compare it to the image that you're looking at, which is being recorded by a camera. Specifically, the webcam that's part of my computer. I know, I need to get better stuff, but this is the first episode. But it's obvious that that's not as good as that image could get, because you look at other stuff around it, it's got much higher resolution just looking at it with your eye. The best cameras in the world cannot get better than the human eye because they don't have the same systems. Now, so they can reach the same resolution now. They didn't even used to be able to do that, but we've gotten to the point where we can reach the same resolution with cameras as we can with the human eye. But the human eye still has something that those cameras don't, and that is adaptive reaction. We control the amount of light and the resolution that we have without ever thinking about it. Our eye does this on its own with that telescoping iris. They have some, they're working on it. Eventually those cameras will be as functional as a human eye, where they will adapt just as quickly, just as reactively. The camera was invented over 100 years ago. I don't know the exact date. And it's taken us this long to get close. The human brain, they're still not close. They have artificial intelligence, but it still takes up rooms, and it's still not as smart as we are. And it's taken a long time for things to get there. And all of that, if you think you can leave the human brain out of it, they don't happen. Without the designer, the artificial intelligence can't exist. They may get to a point where they can reproduce themselves, but to begin with, they can't exist. They also can't exist outside of computers, which have to have design. So they can't escape the fact that they were created by an intelligent designer, those AIs. They'll never be able to escape that fact. And neither can we. And since design requires intelligence, design is evident in natural things, there must be a designer. The designer has to have been intelligent enough to have created all the universe, the forces and creatures, the processes. They all have to be there. Those things just don't work. It doesn't work that way. And random processes jumbled together might accidentally arrange themselves in a way that's seems designed once or twice, but not the entire Earth or the vast cosmos. There's just not enough in the world for that to be the truth. It would need a much bigger computer, and then you have to just ask, where did that computer come from? It needs something else, something that's not part of the universe, that came from outside of it, from before it. And then just a little bit, just as human designers mark and sign their products, the Bible states in Psalm 19:1, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament, the sky, shows his handiwork. If you go out to a desert area where you can't see city lights and things like that, and you look up at night, and you'll see what you could never see anywhere else, because the light kind of blinds it. We push God away. But if you go out there and you look and you see the wonder in the sky, and still then try to say that it all happened by accident, there's something wrong with that. So since it is more reasonable than not to conclude that the universe and everything in it was designed, it requires an all-knowing, all-powerful designer and creator. The Bible calls that being God. But there are other reasons to believe in him as well. Next week, we're going to be looking at what morality says about the existence of God. If you like what I'm doing, please make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so that you'll be notified every time I post, because we all know that sometimes we forget things. I hope that you will have a wonderful week, ladies, and I will see you next Monday at 6:30 p.m. for Women of the Word.